One, two, three. One, two, three.
Hold on, I gotta let Dave in.
Testing.
We gotta let. He's on mute. Dave's on mute. David, can you hear me? Dave Hoppett, can you hear me? You can hear me. Okay, I can't hear you. Is the system on?
System is on.
Okay.
Yep, the switch there.
All right. Dave Hoppett, give me a go on the computer again.
Hello, hello, hello. Can you hear me?
We're good. Thank you.
Good morning. The Maryland Public Service Commission will come to order for its administrative meeting for August 24th, 2022. Before we begin today, I'd like to recognize a very dedicated employee that will be moving on. And is she here today? She is here today. Deborah Dove, sitting in the middle in green there. She's been an administrative specialist with this agency for the past 6 years, working tirelessly for the Transportation Division. Many do not know that while some of us had the luxury of staying home for the better part of a year and a half during COVID, the folks in some of our departments were here every day in the building. That includes a lot of the folks in the Transportation Division. She was one of our original employees to process all the applications when we assumed the responsibilities for the Transportation Network Operators, otherwise known as Uber and Lyft. And I don't want to ask Deborah, but she's probably processed thousands, if not more than 10,000 of these applications over the years. The Commission is very appreciative of her dedication, of her work to protect the traveling public, and we wish her well as she heads to sunnier skies and relocates on her move to Jacksonville, Florida. So, Deborah, thank you very much for your service. We do appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner O'Donnell.
I'd like to take a moment, a point of personal privilege, to welcome a former colleague of mine from the Maryland House of Delegates, Al Carr. Al and I sat next to each other for some years on environment and transportation. So welcome, former delegate. Thank you.
With that, we have meeting minutes to approve from our last meeting 2 weeks ago, August 10th, 2022. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. The meeting minutes are approved. Good morning, Mr. Secretary.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. There are 13 items on today's consent agenda. At the outset, also like to note that we will call item 16 on the administrative agenda last today. Turning to the consent agenda, item number 1 is a notice from AEP Generation Resources, Inc. of change in ownership of the Racine Renewable Energy Facility. Items 2 through 6 are requests for certification of renewable energy facilities for Energy Power Partners Service Company, LLC, Ocean Energy Holdings, LLC, number 3, Energy Power Investment Company, LLC, and MRPC Holdings, LLC. Item 4, Energy Power Investment Company, LLC for Eastern Landfill Gas 1, LLC. Item number 5, the same company for Eastern Landfill Gas 2, LLC. And item 6, Settlers Trail Wind Farm, LLC. Items 7 to 11 are weather station designations from Washington Gas Light Company, Hagerstown Light Department, UGI Utilities, Inc., Potomac Electric Power Company, and Delmarva Power and Light Company, and the Potomac Edison Company. Item number 12 is a request from X2Com, Inc., DBA DC Communications to cancel its operating authority. And item 13 consists of tariff revisions regarding 8YY access charge reform from Charter FiberLink, Maryland, LLC.
Thank you. Do commissioners have questions on any of these consent agenda items? Seeing none, with respect to item number 1, I would move that we note the filing. With respect to items number 2, 3, and 6, I would move that we approve the application and issue a renewable energy facility ID certification number, direct the applicant to establish a REC account with PGM GATS within 30 days of certification, and direct the applicants to notify the Commission within 30 days if the information on which the application is based should change. With respect to items number 4 and 5, I move that we approve the application and issue a renewable energy facility ID certification number, direct the applicant to establish a REC account with PJM GATS within 30 days of certification, and file an on-site and behind-the-meter generation report with the Commission within 1 week of each recording of the generation date with GATS, and direct the applicant to notify the Commission within 30 days if the information on which the application is based should change. With respect to items number 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11, I move that we approve the weather station designations for the purpose of determining when there is an extreme weather period that requires restrictions on electricity and natural gas service terminations under COMAR 20.31.3.3 and COMAR 20.31.3.4. With respect to item number 12, I move that we note the transfer of customers and cancel the company's operating authority. And finally, with respect to item number 13, I move that we accept the tariff revisions for filing with an effective date of August 19, 2022. The vote begins with Commissioner Bubar.
Aye.
Commissioner Linton.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
And Commissioner Richard.
Aye.
I vote aye. The motions are approved.
Mr. Chairman, item number 14 on the administrative agenda is a request from Costin Solar, Inc. for approval of its decommissioning plan pursuant to PPRP condition number 30.
Thank you. Good morning to our staff.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Roger Austin on behalf of staff. On December 21st, 2021, the Commission issued an order granting Costin Solar, Inc., a CPCN, to construct an 8.75 megawatt solar generating station in Somerset County. Pursuant to PPRP's license condition 30, Costin Solar is required to provide the Commission, PPRP, and Somerset County with a decommissioning plan for review and approval prior to the start of construction. The decommissioning plan is required to restore the site to the condition for which it was zoned prior to construction. The plan must also provide for the recycle or reuse of project components to the maximum extent practicable and the proper disposal of those components where necessary. Finally, Costin Solar must also secure a funding mechanism that covers the cost of implementing the decommissioning plan that is to be updated every 5 years over the life of the project to account for inflation or other necessary changes. This is to ensure that the state and or county are not responsible for decommissioning costs at the end of the project's useful life or in the event that it is abandoned. Staff has reviewed the Costin Solar decommissioning plan and finds that it adequately addresses, as is required by Condition 30, how project components that are subject to decommissioning will be removed and or recycled, and how the project site will be restored. The total decommissioning cost is estimated to be $700,000. Costin Solar proposes to meet this cost by establishing a decommissioning fund, which will be held in an external trust. The company will make regular contributions to the fund, which is expected to accumulate sufficient value to compensate and pay for the totality of Costin's decommissioning activities. While it is apparent that the trust will accrue sufficient value over time, based on initial estimates, to cover the expected cost to decommission the facilities, it may not be able to handle obligations in the short run should something happen to Costin's facilities. Staff expressed this concern to Costin, and Costin indicated that they would be able to obtain an insurance rider that would provide sufficient coverage to compensate for decommissioning should the facility sustain damage that prevent continued operation of the facilities. Staff believes Costin's two-step approach to funding its decommissioning plan is both innovative and an efficient way to mitigate and compensate for their estimated decommissioning liabilities. Staff recommends that the Commission approve the decommissioning plan and direct the applicant to annually report on the status of its external trust and provide evidence that it has secured appropriate insurance coverage to compensate for the balance of their unfunded liabilities. I'm available to answer any general questions you may have on Costin's decommissioning plan, and David Valcarenci from the Accounting Division is here to answer questions on staff support for the funding mechanism that Costin will be using to cover its decommissioning plan.
Thank you, Mr. Austin. Mr. Beaglemans, do we have a representative from Willis Tower Watson today?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, we have their comments on file. Counsel for Costin Solar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. David Beaglemans on behalf of Costin Solar Inc. I'm also joined by Mr. Steve Wood, one of the co-developers of the project. I would like to take a moment to thank staff for working with us on this. We spent many months working with staff on this proposal list before the Commission. We think it's an innovative proposal that's frankly more efficient than the typical bond that you've seen for most of these plans. I think Mr. Austin did a good job summarizing the buck sheet, but we're here to answer any questions the Commission may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Do commissioners have questions on this request? Commissioner O'Donnell.
Mr. Austin, I wanted to ask you about, and this isn't a concern with this particular application or this particular filing of a decommissioning plan. It's a more general question on how these work. So let's assume the trust gets fully funded to I think you said $700,000. And everything's humming along. We don't have to rely on the insurance policy anymore, and that was taken out in the beginning. And the company, for some reason, goes bankrupt, files bankruptcy. How is the trust treated in those bankruptcy proceedings? In other words, is there a priority lien associated with that that would keep the state and county whole, or how does that work? Do we know?
I'll let David deal with any cost questions, money questions.
It's not a question that we delved into. I don't know the answer to that question.
Fair enough. Mr. Bugelmans, can you shed any light for me?
That's a good question, Your Honor, and frankly, I don't know the answer to that question either. The trust would be managed pursuant to an escrow agreement, and in terms of the ability of parties to draw from the account, that would be spelled out in the agreement. But I'm not sure how bankruptcy would impact that.
Yeah, I'm not sure either, and I really truly don't know. I'm not suggesting one way or another. I'm just trying to figure out. I know that when the person who oversees the proceedings for a bankruptcy determines what the assets are and what the priority of the liens are and who gets paid first and who gets paid what and how all that's divvied up, there's an obvious question here for me. Where does the trust stand with regard to meeting its obligation to the county or the state?
Well, Your Honor, I would say the fact that the monies are going to be held in an external trust outside of Costin gives a little bit more security. So if there was some sort of bankruptcy filing, those dollars would be removed. I think outside of.
Yeah, it sounds like you're speculating, Mr. Valcrangi. You said you don't know for sure.
Well, I don't know that for sure, but
Okay.
it would be my I would say that since they're outside of Costin.
Fair enough. I'm not going to hold up these proceedings, Mr. Chairman, for this question, but I would like to delve into that if staff could maybe do a little legal research into how a bankruptcy proceeding would apply to these decommissioning funds. Thank you.
Commissioner Bubar.
I think it's a question for Costin, but I think this might have been listed in the filing. Could you give any additional background on, has this approach been used elsewhere? And, how did you kind of become aware or realize that this was something that, would save the company money? Just a little bit more background on any experience or any information you have on how this was used elsewhere.
Sure. So the sinking fund approach is fairly common. Not just for public decommissioning plans that are approved either by a local jurisdiction or a commission, but also just internally for projects to plan for decommissioning. So it's something that's been used across the industry for quite some time. We did look into this in Maryland. The only other example we could find that the commission's looked at is for the Calvert Cliffs facility for that decommissioning, obviously a much larger and more complex facility than this. So it is something that is used, but in terms of the Maryland Commission, there isn't a huge amount of precedent on that. The insurance product we had never seen before, and so I think if you look at sort of what's innovative about this, I think that's really it. But again, that's designed to address the risk of until the trust is fully funded. Is there a mechanism there to cover premature decommissioning?
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no other questions, I would move that we approve the decommissioning plan, direct the company to annually report on the status of its external trust, and provide evidence that it has secured appropriate insurance coverage to compensate for the balance of its unfunded liabilities. The vote begins with Commissioner Bubar.
Aye.
Commissioner Linton.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
And Commissioner Richard.
Aye.
I vote aye. The motion is approved.
Mr. Chairman, item number 15 is a request from CPV Backbone Solar LLC for approval of its decommissioning plan pursuant to PPRP condition number 36 and case number 9663.
Thank you. Good morning to our staff.
Yep. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. I'm Roy Terry on behalf of staff. On May 24th, 2022, in compliance with Commission Order number 90038, approval to construct a 175 megawatt solar photovoltaic generation facility in Maryland, CPV Backbone Solar, Backbone or the company, filed with the Commission a request to approve a decommissioning plan. According to the Commission Order Number 90038, Power Plant Research Programs or PPRP's Condition 36, Backbone is required to submit a decommissioning plan at least 30 days prior to the start of any construction activity other than timbering. The decommissioning plan shall describe responsible party or parties, timeframes, and estimated costs for decommissioning, dismantling, removal, and legal disposal of all components, including cables, wirings, and foundations below and above the ground. Condition 36 also requires the company to implement a financial mechanism to ensure that decommissioning costs are not borne by the state and or the county at the end of the useful life of the project or in the event of abandonment of the project. In its final decommissioning plan, which Backbone updated based on discussions it had with the company, with PPRP, the company stated that it will post a surety bond in the amount of $1,919,024 to include overhead costs of the plan, which includes permitting costs, as well as overhead management costs for the rare, threatened, and endangered species survey and timber reclamation plan. The proposed bond also includes a 10% contingency cost. Staff recommends that the Commission approve CPV Backbone Solar's proposed decommissioning plan and direct the company to provide a documentary evidence for securing the bond of $1,919,024 prior to the start of construction of the project. Thank you. I'm available for any questions, and Mr. Valcaringi would also have to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Daria. I recognize that Power Plant Research Program did file a pleading noting that they do not object to this approval today. Counsel for CPV Backbone Solar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. David Begelmans, this time on behalf of CPV Backbone Solar LLC. Nothing to add to staff's presentation, but I'm here again to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have questions for the parties? Commissioner Bubar.
I actually have a question for the PPRP folks, but that'll be my second question. So this one is for CPV. Is there currently a contractual relationship between CPV and the recycling company? I noticed the recycling company provided some background information on what they would do, but I didn't know if you had any existing relationship with them.
There isn't an existing business relationship, so there isn't a formal contract with the recycling company.
Okay, it was helpful what they had included. So for the PPRP folks, welcome. Thank you. I just have a question on maybe it's your opinion on the existence of hazardous materials in any of the things that are going to have to be decommissioned. I think the assumption is that everything's going to go into a landfill, but I don't know if you had any insights you want to provide in terms of is there going to be any issues with that based on the materials that are in all of the components?
Commissioner Bubar, Jenny Rogers is here this morning from PPRP, and I'll let her address that issue.
Hi, good morning. I don't think we addressed this issue directly, but there are some small trace bits of hazardous materials in the materials that will be decommissioned, and I believe that will be addressed at decommissioning and taken care of as part of the process.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no additional questions, I would move that we approve the decommissioning plan and direct the company to provide documentary evidence for securing a bond in the amount of $1,919,024 prior to the start of the construction of the project. The vote begins with Commissioner Bubar.
Aye.
Commissioner Linton.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
And Commissioner Richard.
Aye.
I vote aye. The motion is approved.
Mr. Chairman, moving to item number 17, which consists of smart lighting tariff revisions to Schedule SL and PL from Baltimore Gas and Electric Company.
Good morning to our staff team.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Brett Sproul on behalf of staff. On April 29th, 2022, the Baltimore Gas and Electric Company, or BGE, filed revised tariff pages for the street lighting, SL, and private area lighting, PL, customer classes. The tariff pages are being revised at this time to include updated language and reflect provisions related to the installation of new smart lighting control equipment. The main purpose of installing this smart lighting control equipment is to improve the operational efficiency and increase customer satisfaction. BGE began evaluating smart lighting control technology in 2015, and testing of this technology took place between 2017 and 2020, with test deployment occurring in 2021. As BGE has progressed with its smart lighting technology, the response from BGE customers has been very positive and has been recorded through direct meetings and demonstrations with its customers. Prior to implementation of the smart lighting program, BGE in 2019 conducted a cost-benefit analysis for the program for internal management approval. The company provided staff with this analysis, in which it identified operation and maintenance cost savings and greenhouse gas reductions as program benefits. BGE, however, noted that the actual timing and amount of the operational benefits that would be realized would be different due to deployment delays associated with COVID-19, increased system integration costs, and inflation. The company did not further provide an updated cost-benefit analysis to account for these changes. Staff concludes that the lack of an updated cost-benefit analysis is not a cause for disapproval of the proposed tariff changes, but notes that it expects BGE to provide a reconciliation of the original cost-benefit analysis against updated costs in order to demonstrate the achievement of benefits in the prudence review of BGE's multi-year rate plan. The projects and costs associated with the installation of the smart lighting control equipment were included in the company's most recent rate case, number 9645, in 2020, and include both an IT project and a field project. BGE includes the costs associated with these projects in its base distribution rates for its multi-year rate plan in case number 9645. Therefore, in the instant filing, there are no changes to rates, as these projects are already reflected in the current distribution rates. Additionally, the main benefits associated with the smart control lighting equipment are faster response times to outages with reduced truck rollouts, improved reporting on lighting outages, and improved customer satisfaction. BGE expects to begin its full deployment phase of this program following the potential approval of this filing, and has been working with and will continue to work with its SL and PL customers directly as deployment of this technology goes underway. In conclusion, staff has analyzed and reviewed the company's filing documentation processes and recommends that the Commission accept for filing the tariff revisions to schedule SL and PL customer classes with an effective date of August 24th, 2022. Thank you, and I am available for questions along with Samaru Diriri from Engineering Division. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Sproul. Today is the day that we're looking at street lighting issues across the state. I was mentioning to Commissioner Richard before this started, if you take a look at a satellite image from space, you could see the difference in what Baltimore region looks like versus the Washington, D.C. region looks like, largely because BGE has converted large amounts of its public street lighting to LEDs, so it's a whiter light from space. And the Pepco region is more of an orange because of a lot of the lighting material that they use. I'll show my colleagues here. Thank you, Mr. Sproul. We'll turn to counsel for BGE.
Good morning, Chairman Stanek and Commissioners. Beverly Sakura on behalf of BGE. And I gotta say, you just come up with the most interesting things that you find on the internet. BGE appreciates the thorough review that staff did of our tariff filing and also just the project in general. I know I've said this before and some people don't believe me, but I really do find staff's analysis to be very helpful for me because I end up learning.
Well, we apologize. There's a roof deck above us, and I think they're replacing some of the tiles.
Oh, okay. I'll just go on. I end up learning so much about what's going on. So staff's review is also very helpful for me. We did do a BCA in 2019 when we were looking at deploying this, after doing some testing. But, as staff noted, there are definitely operational benefits which were included. But what the benefits that really I think, we're focusing on are the ones that the customers have, been asking us for. Customers, the municipalities, the car dealerships, the people who have large areas of lighting, they want lights that are on. They want lights that get fixed quickly when they do go out, and they want lights that they have some control over. Did they ask us, oh, can you give us smart lighting controls? No, but they asked us for the other three things, and smart lighting controls are really what, will give us the ability to do that. And so when we did the BCA, we did, include a limited amount of, what's called societal benefits, but really, those are really hard to quantify. But it's still, at the end of the day, including just a limited amount of societal benefits, it was at least, to some largely neutral, if not somewhat positive. So I think, if we were to update it, it would come out significantly larger if we, positive if we tried to include all these other societal benefits. The value of, someone being able to walk their dog without having to worry about a dark spot on their street. The value of a car dealership knowing that their their lights are gonna be on, and that their property is gonna be safe. Customers like the idea. I'm not going to get into too much detail, but the lights will allow customer lights to go on at the same time. With the photovoltaic, there's a little bit of variation because of them coming on with the sun going up and down. And so this will allow a customer to have all their lights come on at the same time, so there's more consistency. But as I was saying, we do recognize that, we do have some costs in rates currently. When we come in for our next MYP, we will have to discuss the prudency of the expenditures, and so at that time, we will be prepared to do so. I do have Mr. Frayne, who you're familiar with, and also Eric Barger from our outdoor lighting group, if you should have any other additional questions for us.
Thank you, Ms. Sikora, and apologies for the distraction. Commissioner Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for that presentation. And again, I also want to applaud the company for its introduction of all the LEDs, and I think this is an important new technology to provide the types of benefits and savings that you mentioned. I did just have a question for you about a customer that does want to work with the company about dimming and lighting schedules, and I noted that that there's a set 4,000 hour burn time that it can't be exceeded. But if a customer goes below that, they would not realize, they don't seem to be able to realize any savings from any of those adjustments. And I just want to find out why that customer benefit isn't recognized and somehow compensated.
It's because currently streetlights are unmetered, and so the 4,000 hours is really based on the estimated burn time, looking at kind of, over the course of a year, sun up to sundown, or the other way, sundown to sun up, how long the lights will be burning, to get, to be able to kind of quantify, the additional reduction in usage if they were to change the dimming or the light schedule significantly. We'd have to have meters to really see, what that usage is. So it's really a function of just not having the technology to meter the usage and sticking with kind of the 4,000 that it's based on.
Okay, well, fair enough. But as we get to rate case time, it does seem to me that if you have at least an estimate for 4,000 hours, it seems like, and since this is a circumstance where you're working with individual customers, and some of these customers may, have be setting schedules and dimming schedules for hundreds of lights. So this could be a significant benefit to customers as well, also to state policy as far as saving energy. So I would just encourage the company maybe to dig into that a little bit, so that when we get to time to discuss this at our prudency review, that perhaps there is opportunities to further enhance customer benefits from these devices. So
certainly, but the conversations that we've had so far, we don't see significant changes, but certainly we can work on this, and technology is changing all the time, and perhaps not too far in the distance we'll be able to meter the streetlights so that it can be, based on actual usage. So
Okay, well,
it's
all
something
of that, or even just estimates. I imagine if you're working with a customer and, you know what the amount that you want to charge for 4,000 hours,
Right.
if they say, well, by dimming, we're going to, and reducing the lighting time, I think we can agree there will be savings. And it just seems like even if we maintain the status quo of just estimates, since you are working with customers, there ought to be a way to come up with estimates. Again, I think this is a benefit to customers. It's a benefit potentially to state policies on energy consumption. So again, I would just encourage the company to bring some of that information when it comes time for prudency reviews. So thank
certainly, we
you.
will
Thank you,
look
Mr.
into
Chairman.
that further.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Donnell.
I wanted to ask the company, Ms. Sakura or Mr. Frayne or whoever might be able to answer this. Have you had any experience, and this is not the subject, I don't think, of your instant filing, but have you had any experience with third-party attachment agreements with regard to these street lighting upgrades? Because I think we're going to be discussing that extensively in the next filing, and I just wanted to get BG&E's perspective,
I'm
if you
going
have it.
to turn to Mr. Barger because I have absolutely no idea.
The only examples that come to mind are cell phone antennas on customer-owned equipment. So in the case of Baltimore City, in that scenario, BGE would install a meter, and then approval would be given, by the equipment owner, which would be the city, and police-monitored surveillance cameras as well, a similar scenario that are attached to. We have attached those to company-owned wood poles, but the same scenario with the consumption of power.
So how does it work for BG&E when a customer buys a street light and attaches it to the pole that you maintain ownership for?
In some scenarios, the company furnishes and installs that equipment upon the purchase, and then it is maintained from that point forward. In the scenario, and a good example is Baltimore City, they procure a lot of their own equipment. In some cases, have a contractor install the poles and fixtures, and then BGE would come through, install the supply cable, and then once energized, we would maintain from that point.
And in those situations, there's no third-party attachment agreements involved?
Commissioner O'Donnell, I think if the equipment is being attached to an asset that BGE owns, there would be a third-party attachment agreement that would be involved.
And are they confidential for your company?
Certainly, if it's a specific agreement with a third party, it might be confidential. Yes, depending on the information that's in the agreement. I don't know specifically about any agreements that we have today with third parties, but I would expect if it has specific customer information, it would be confidential.
Okay, well, I'm sure we'll find out a lot more in the next item, so, thank you.
Seeing no additional questions, I would move that we accept the tariff revisions for filing and to direct BG to file clean copies of the revised tariff pages with an effective date of August 24th, 2022. The vote begins with Commissioner Bubar.
Aye.
Commissioner Linton.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
And Commissioner Richard.
Aye.
I vote aye. The motion is approved.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, the final item today is item number 16, which consists of tariff revisions to SSL-OH and SSL-OH-LED from Potomac Electric Power Company.
Thank you. Before we get started with this item today, I note that we have a number of parties that filed pleadings, and we have some in the room today. Delegate, I would invite you and your advisor to join us at the table here. Do we have counsel for some of the municipalities with us? If you could raise your hand.
I'm not counsel, but
Okay, well, join us. Why don't you sit at the far left side here?
Mr. Stanek, I am the attorney for Chevy Chase Village. Where should I sit?
Why don't you sit at the far end?
Thank you.
Anybody else planning to speak today, if you could raise your hand? Okay, we're all getting comfortable. Sorry, Mr. Greger, you have to stand today. All right, so before Mr. Greger begins, this item, which we do have 6 or 7 pleadings in and comments, was filed by Mr. Michael of PEPCO back on April the 8th. The tariff revisions at issue were with respect to customer ownership of overhead street lighting, and the purpose was to clarify and not change existing procedures in the approved tariff. So those are the four corners by which this item on today's administrative meeting will be heard. I recognize that there are a number of other items that we wish to discuss today that the parties have brought to the Commission's attention that are outside of the four corners of the tariff revisions being considered today. The Commission will hear those arguments and make a determination whether they are or are not germane to this proceeding and to the proposal that PEPCO has before the Commission. So we'll have this go very orderly. We'll hear from staff counsel first. We'll hear from all the other parties, and then we'll hear rebuttal from the utility. So, Mr. Greger, I turn it over to you. And, we have Mr. Hoppick of staff counsel on the line as well. Good morning, Mr. Hoppick. Good morning, Mr. Greger.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. David Hoppick on behalf of staff. PEPCO has filed revisions to its schedule SSL-OH and SSL-OH LED streetlights serviced by overhead wires tariffs. The revisions clarify what streetlight equipment PEPCO will sell to government entities upon written request and what equipment will be owned and maintained by the company. Other revisions include statements regarding make-ready work, selling streetlights at fair market value, and if the company maintains ownership of the pole, the purchasing customer must agree to a third-party pole attachment agreement. Please note that PEPCO states that none of the proposed tariff changes represent a change in operations. In response to a staff data request, the company agreed that a customer installing a streetlight on a company pole with overhead service not listed in Schedule SSL-OH or SSL-OH LED could select an option not listed if they provide their own maintenance, subject to safety, reliability, and engineering review by the company. Staff has recommended additional tariff language stating this. Staff recommends that the Commission accept the proposed tariff filing as revised by staff with an effective date of August 24th, 2022, and require the company to file clean copies of its tariff. As staff notes in its comments, staff believes that the scope of what the Commission is required to rule on today is limited to the proposed tariff language. Thank you, and we are available for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hoppick. We'll now turn to a number of parties that have filed correspondence and or pleadings. We'll begin with Delegate Al Carr, filed a letter on behalf of select members of the Maryland General Assembly on May 9th of 2022. Good morning, Delegate.
Okay, can you hear me okay? All right, great. Good morning, Chairman Stanek, Commissioners. For the record, I'm Al Carr. I'm a member of the Maryland House of Delegates. I represent the 18th District in Montgomery County. Thanks for the opportunity to ask you to resolve these long-standing issues. Shout out to my former colleague and committee mate, O'Donnell. Good to see you up here. And also to Commissioner Bubar. Congratulations on your new role. In 2007, in a unanimous vote in the House, including the support of then Delegate O'Donnell, the General Assembly passed a bill establishing our state policy that local governments have the right to acquire and maintain utility-owned streetlights. For that policy to be successfully implemented, there needs to be a tariff that's compatible with that policy. In the 15 years that has gone by, there has never been a tariff that implements that policy. PEPCO's and staff's proposal unfortunately falls short of what is needed. It allows PEPCO to continue to erect artificial barriers to municipal ownership of lights. It means that Maryland will continue to lag behind other states, you can see this from space, in modernizing our street lighting infrastructure. The Maryland Energy Administration took a close look at these issues and published a report in late 2020 confirming that providing a path to municipal ownership of lights is a best practice that has many environmental and financial benefits. Other states where this policy is working well include Connecticut, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, New York, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, Maine, and right next door in Pepco's Washington, D.C. territory. So please don't kick the can down the road or accept half measures that will put the burden back on local governments to come back or file complaints. I'm asking that you take bold action to resolve all of these issues so that the policy can be implemented. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. I noted that we only had one party that responded to staff's buck sheet. That was Chevy Chase Village yesterday afternoon. All the other pleadings were somewhat dated back in the spring, so we'll hear from the other two parties at the table. Can you enter an appearance, please? State your name and who you represent.
My name is Andy Leon Harney, and I'm the village manager of Section 3 of the Village of Chevy Chase, a small incorporated municipality near Washington, D.C., and I've been asked to submit comments and appear before you by our community elected council. We've been working for over a decade to purchase our own street lighting. Commissioner Obi Linton may recall several of our council members and I met with the External Relations Department in October of 2009 when he was on the PSC staff to complain about extraordinarily high charges Pepco wanted to levy to put up, at that time, induction lights that we wanted to purchase. That dispute was left unresolved because Pepco refused to budge and there were no tariffs for us as guidance. The commissioners now have an opportunity to change that for local governments, for all the Pepco distribution area with this decision today. Today, induction lights are no longer manufactured even in favor of the more energy efficient LED lights. Some of you may recall that we testified in rate case 9655. We are eager to purchase, install, and maintain our own LED streetlights for the betterment of our community and the safety of our residents. In terms of public policy, it would seem to us that the commissions and the companies' best interest would be served by creating a climate which encourages LED lighting for the sake of stability and of the sustainability of the overall grid. One of the purposes of this tariff was to clarify and make it easier for municipalities and counties to purchase their own street lighting. It falls far short. Just as with rate tariffs, the goal should be fiscal predictability. And there's so many unanswered questions in this tariff that no municipality could possibly project the costs for conversion from existing streetlights to new, more energy efficient lighting owned by a municipality. There are four areas that we take issue with. One, which I'm sure you'll be hearing a lot about this morning, the jurisdiction of the PSC over the third-party attachment agreements and the need for transparency in those agreements for public utilities. Two, the lack of fiscal predictability in defining the costs of a municipality owning and maintaining their own streetlights. Three, the use of equivalencies for LED lights instead of what the tariff mandates. And four, savings, as Commissioner Richards pointed out, on dimming. We've already submitted comments, so I'll try and be brief. If you have any questions about my written testimony, please feel free to ask me. The tariff as written requires that PSC sign off on a document that neither the target recipients, counties and municipalities, nor the Commission has seen, even in draft form, the third-party attachment agreement. The draft tariff and interactions with Pepco make clear that an essential component of municipal ownership of streetlights will be this third-party attachment agreement to be entered into between Pepco and the municipality, setting forth terms that must be agreed to, including fees to be charged to the municipality. Unfortunately, Pepco continues to refuse to provide a model streetlight attachment agreement. They incorrectly, we believe, claim that the 1987 Maryland case, CMP Telephone versus Maryland Delaware Cable Association, is justification that PSC should have no role in regulating these attachment agreements. The case involved communication systems, and the Maryland Court of Appeals ruled that PSC lacked jurisdiction over such communication systems and left it to the FCC for oversight. But streetlights are clearly within the PSC purview. And PSC should be scrutinizing these agreements to make sure that essential elements are fully disclosed so that municipalities in advance can assess the terms that need to be considered when owning and maintaining their own streetlights on Pepco poles. In an August 16th call with PSC and Pepco staff and PSC staff and interested parties, despite months and months of objections to keeping these agreements confidential, Pepco maintained that the company does not even have a draft of such an agreement, although it's referenced in the tariff, which was filed May 8th. They maintain such agreements are confidential and must be negotiated on a case-by-case basis and refuse to discuss fees contained therein. They fail to recognize that as municipalities, we would be required under the Freedom of Information Act to disclose the contents of these streetlight agreements. Clearly, this is not a document that the FCC is going to regulate, a fact that Pepco is well aware of, yet they hide behind the 1987 court case. Respectfully, we submit that the Commission has a responsibility to regulate these agreements and ask that Pepco be required to set forth a detailed draft of such a contemplated agreement or its substantive terms, including possible costs that might be proposed or charged. Without such information, it's impossible for a municipality to determine whether it makes fiscal sense to pursue ownership of lights. Second, most important aspect of the proposed tariff is the question of fiscal predictability. The staff did not address the many vague references to areas carved out by the company to charge counties and municipalities for work in connection with the possible switch to either municipal or county-owned lighting. Make-ready, reasonable costs, CIAC, construction in aid of CIAC for LED lights, all are notably absent. How can one budget with so many unknowns? For these and many other reasons outlined in our written comments, we ask that you not approve this proposed tariff and ask Pepco to provide more detail so that the Commission can better meet its mandate to serve the public interest. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Involved in this process before, neither have I. And so we have appreciated their understanding of that and letting us know when things will be happening. They've been very helpful in that respect, and they were also very helpful in setting up a call between Pepco representatives and the village and other municipal representatives on the 16th. We appreciated that. Also, the municipal liaison, who is generally Pepco's person who deals with municipalities, I think has not been reappointed and is generally a fairly low-level individual anyway in respect to talking about policy. So we appreciate that very much. This is an administrative matter, as you know. Our position is that we believe that because of the limited nature of this, the way that this is handled, there are issues that are not being dealt with that are really should be part of it and are ongoing. They are requirements that are being applied by Pepco to even begin a discussion of acquiring lights. One is charging municipalities to create a street lighting inventory. That is a prerequisite to discussing whether or not a municipality may acquire the lights. In our conversation on the 16th, Pepco would not agree to provide anything other than the municipality's bill in terms of inventory. We believe that part of what the rates have been paying for throughout the years have been for a company to act in a reasonable way and keep an inventory of its equipment. We are not being given access to that inventory or any information. There's also not been any kind of indication, except during the phone call. There was one item that was noted, and that was clearly not Pepco's full position, what needs to be in that inventory. It sounds to us like it will require an expert to do it. It is unusual when trying to buy an asset owned by another party that you are required to evaluate what that asset is as part of a prerequisite to discussing buying the asset. That's the first issue. And some of these issues have been addressed by Chevy Chase Village, which have also been very well addressed by Ms. Harney this morning, and so I won't dwell on those. One of the things that in the first response to the staff's request for information, the PEPCO has indicated they want to clarify that fair market value will be used to estimate the value of the equipment. So they are attempting to clarify that matter here in this tariff, this limited tariff filing. They have not provided any information as to how fair market value will be determined. The municipalities have a position. Tanco Lighting also states it very well. Previously, these municipalities as ratepayers have paid for the lights that are there, the maintenance of those lights, and the fact that those are being depreciated over time and will have to be replaced. So fair market value should be something that is determined in terms of what components will be part of it, not necessarily in each. This commission cannot say in each case what that value will be, but the components should be set out. If this clarification stops at just claiming, well, we're going to use fair market value, well, they're required to do that by the law. So there's no question about that. Why is that clarification even needed unless there is something behind it? Now, in a private conversation with your staff, PEPCO has provided that information, and your staff has indicated that, in fact, they find it reasonable and have used a Black's Law Dictionary determination of, or definition of what fair market value is, as being a willing seller and a willing buyer. Well, that's from someone who has been to law school and has done a lot of work on valuation of things. After that, that's a pretty simplistic definition and doesn't recognize in this case that that's not true. We're dealing with the only provider in the municipal rights-of-way who has control of that and comes to you, and as do we, for determination of various matters. This is not a willing seller and a willing buyer in an open market. It is anything but. And so we were somewhat surprised to see that there were computations. So clearly, PEPCO has computations of how they desire to determine fair market value that they will not share with the municipalities. They will share it with your staff privately. In terms of an open process, to be dealing with the entities that the state law requires PEPCO to sell their lights to make this like it's a standard negotiation with AT&T or Verizon over whether they get to place a small cell on the pole and how much money can you get for it. That is not the market that we are in. We are in a market where these municipalities have paid over the years for these assets over and over again. So there should be some discussion about this because it is a requirement to be determined before the lights can be purchased. To make it a secret that is shared with some and not others, in some way keeping an upper hand for negotiation, is not what we think is the purpose of this proceeding. In addition, the third-party attachment agreement, I have done many of them and will be happy to provide, in fact said I would, provide examples of attachment agreements that my municipality has entered into and others have, because we own some poles and various vendors wish to use them. PEPCO said very definitively that they had not put together in our phone call not only what all the requirements are for this inventory that they're going to require before they even talk to you about it, but they don't have a standard pole attachment agreement. Now, thanks to some very good detective work, we have determined that there is, in fact, a PEPCO pole attachment agreement with Montgomery County, Maryland, dated the 3rd of March, 2015. I have one here with me. I have various copies. If you'd like to see it, we can submit it for the record. And this is clearly a pole attachment agreement for local government-owned lights. 99% of these agreements are the same. They are to protect the owner of the pole from misuse, improper maintenance, and they are to impose the requirements that are broadly accepted to be used when you work on poles and when you install on poles. And no one has an argument with that. But as has been noted today, this is another charge that could possibly be placed and will be placed. This agreement has a charge for a license. The county will pay an administrative fee as follows. For poles, routes consisting of 1 to 10 poles, $305 per route. For those consisting of 11 to 30 poles, $600 per route. For poles consisting of 31 or more poles, $21 per pole, $21. Those are all in dollars. There's an administrative fee, but there is no rental fee for you having the lights on the poles. We wish to be reassured about that. We wish to know what this is going to cost. Because right now, there's a claim of fair market value with no definition on it. There is a requirement to create an inventory, which has not been defined, but sounds like it's going to require expert assistance and no assistance from PEPCO except a bill. And there is a requirement that there be a a third-party attachment agreement, and we do not know if there's going to be some kind of fee attached to that for continued use of the pole, as opposed to an administrative fee to deal with the application. So all of those are costs that are not referenced and would be in private, requested to be paid by PEPCO to the municipalities. This has been a long, long process to get a conversation, at least with PEPCO, about what they require. At least we have some knowledge now, after assistance through this proceeding, to know what it will be. But we don't know how much it will be. Finally, we have requested additions to tariff language to require that local government that buys, installs, and maintains its own streetlights will not be subject to a kayak. Local government that buys, installs, and maintains its own streetlights will be able to physically install and maintain those streetlights on that same PEPCO pole, assuming the type of fixture can be accommodated. We have heard today that the municipalities will be allowed to choose other fixtures than those already listed by PEPCO, and so are pleased to see that and hear it, because of there are some real concerns about the wattage of the lights in particular. And require that any third-party attachment agreement not include a continuing charge for attachment, at minimum. We would also, believe that what the components of fair market value are should be determined. And if it can't be determined here, then it should be determined in a broader proceeding. The nature of this hearing should not limit the proper administration of this sale of state-mandated sale to municipalities by PEPCO. Otherwise, we are in a room with PEPCO setting the rules, and we presumably would be in court after that, which is expensive and not useful. We understand staff's argument that there should not be any costs of this acquisition that are placed on the other ratepayers. We don't think that anything that is being requested here does that. We've submitted our comments. The comments, by the way, that have been submitted by Tanco Lighting. From Commissioner Richards' question earlier today. There is, in fact, a dimming technology. It is called smart metering nodes. They're available to others in the United States. They're being used. And so there is technology, and from what I understand from their submission, it's not very expensive. So dimming should be something that is part of a tariff so that municipalities are not required to pay for full lighting when it's not needed and, frankly, when it's not wanted.
Thank you, Ms. Ferguson. Just a point of order. This is not a hearing today. This is a matter scheduled for the administrative meeting. There are some distinctions with respect to that. Additionally, just a clarification before we move on. Your 3 requested additions to the tariff language that we received yesterday afternoon, have they been shared with the parties before yesterday?
The 2 of them come from the discussion that we had on the 16th.
Okay, that's all I need to know.
Yeah.
And the last one?
The last one about, there's just nothing that actually requires the company to place the lights on their pole. So we wanted to be sure that that's not something we run into later. That is not something that we discussed specifically.
Okay, that's all I needed.
In part, the phone call was only an hour. Pepco was unable to stay longer. We had more questions.
We'll get into that. We'll get into that. Before we turn to the utility, I just want to confirm, is the town of Chevy Chase present today? Is the town of Washington Grove present today? Is Tanco Lighting present today? Okay, we will not receive testimony from those parties then. We do have their filed pleadings on the record. Mr. Michael, you have quite a list of items to respond to, so I'll turn it over to you.
I sure do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Doug Michael on behalf of Pepco. I also have some colleagues here that, if you get into technical questions, will be able to answer any of those technical questions. I want to first just start on the tariff and why we're here with respect to the tariff. As this commission is aware, Pepco filed a street lighting proposal in 9655. There was a lot of pushback on that proposal, but there were specific things that parties, including Chevy Chase View, Chevy Chase Section 3, Delegate Carr, wanted in that tariff. One, they wanted clear definition in the tariff that streetlights would be sold at fair market value. We met with Delegate Carr to discuss this matter numerous times. In a November 30 email, he requested Pepco to update the tariff to better comply with state law regarding customer-owned lights. That is in this tariff. That was also a request made in 9655. You can look at the amicus brief of Chevy Chase View and Chevy Chase Section 3. They wanted tariff changes to clearly make it clear that if a municipality purchases a street light, they are only paying the street light or the energy charge. This tariff accomplishes that. We also clarified the connection portion of where Pepco's connection starts and where the municipality's connection starts. Those were all things that were raised in 9655. As the commission is aware, in the Delmarva Power rate case, we had a similar tariff with similar issues that we put into place, and those tariff changes to include the language that parrots the law 1-1309, we put that in. It's the same as the Delmarva tariff that the commission has found just and reasonable. Now, the municipalities say there weren't any municipalities involved in that case. But the reason we made the changes in Delmarva is because of the information that was brought up in 9655 and what people wanted to see. And that's why we filed this tariff, to clarify items. Now, I'm not hearing a lot, and I agree, and I appreciate the staff's work on this. I agree with the staff that these tariffs should be approved. Let me walk through the litany of issues that have been raised. First of all, Pepco is more than willing to provide a model pole attachment agreement to the municipalities. It was not until August 16th that we were aware that the municipalities wanted to see a model agreement. It is correct that we, as I stand here today, do not have a model pole attachment agreement for streetlights. It is correct that we have pole attachment agreements for communications purposes, and the one that we provided to the staff through Discovery was a pole attachment agreement between Pepco and another party that had a confidentiality agreement. So we're prepared within 45 days to meet with the municipalities and provide them with a model pole attachment agreement for their review. I don't disagree with Ms. Ferguson that the general items in a pole attachment agreement would be out there. As we indicated in our meeting, our pole attachment agreement would consider ownership, maintenance of streetlight equipment, safety requirements, installation, removal, replacement, relocation, transfer requirements, billing, payment schedules, insurance requirements, indemnification, and an exhibit showing the location of the streetlights. So we're willing to do that. We're willing to create a model streetlight agreement. We don't have one right now. That's just a fact. With respect to the March 2nd, March 3rd agreement, that is not a streetlight pole attachment agreement with Montgomery County. That is a communication streetlight attachment agreement. I would note that that attachment agreement includes requirement that Montgomery County pay for a survey. It requires that Montgomery County pay for the make-ready work, just like the tariff that we have here. So this is not a streetlight pole attachment agreement as indicated. Savings on dimming. Just as BG&E said, our streetlights are not metered, and therefore we cannot do any savings on dimming. We charge a 4,000 hours, and the streetlights are unmetered. We did in 9655 propose putting nodes on that would allow us to do that. Unfortunately, that was not approved. Make-ready costs, those are appropriate costs. They're in every tariff. There is no, and I thought we made this clear on August 16th, and I'll let I'll let our experts talk to this. There is no SEAC charge that we in these tariffs. It's not in the tariffs. So I don't understand that. With respect to the fair market value issue, as noted in the staff's buck sheet, and I look at attachments, it is our response to DR request 2-20. It's in the staff's buck sheet. It's labeled page 21 of the staff's buck sheet. The company specifically set out the elements that it would utilize to determine fair market value. And fair market value is what we're required to do by the statute. We're required by statute to sell these lights at fair market value. And I think it's really important that the commission understand that when we sell these lights to a municipality, it's not a profit center for Pepco. That money would go back to all customers. Any fees that we would charge for attaching to our poles, that money, pole attachment fees, go back to customers. And so we have a statutory obligation to sell our lights at fair market value. That's compliance with the statute. And when you look, we talked about the ways, we would determine the fair market value. It is true that we provided the staff with a calculation, and we're happy to meet with the municipalities and walk through our calculations of fair market value.
Mr. Michael, just for the record, that was DR question 20, is that right?
Yes, it was DR question set 220, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
With respect to the sale is at fair market value, and that's a discussion between a willing purchaser and a willing buyer. If a municipality sends us a letter requesting to purchase the streetlights, we will enter into negotiations with them. And then I want to talk lastly about the issue of the survey. As I pointed out, the survey provision is in this Montgomery County Communications Agreement. And it's not that we don't know where the lights are or what lights are there. We need the survey to determine the value of the property that we're selling. It's just like if you're going to purchase a home, if you are the buyer, you pay for the survey to purchase the home. And that survey helps us determine what the appropriate fair market value is. And that's why we have that survey provision in there. I think I've answered, it was a long litany of questions. I think I've answered them. I'm happy to answer all of your questions too. And I'm sure there'll be many.
Thank you, Mr. Michael. As I noted at the outset, and as Mr. Hoppick noted as well, many of these issues, although some may disagree, fall outside of the four corners of the April 8th tariff filing. I am disappointed. This is an interesting case, but I'm disappointed because it appears that the parties have not worked in good faith with each other to communicate. I keep hearing about this August 16th meeting that only lasted 1 hour. August 16th was only last week. This law has been on the books for 15 plus years now. Mr. Michael, are there any municipalities in your service territory in Maryland that actually own their own streetlights?
I'm unaware of any, Your Honor.
All right, so that could be an indicator of a problem if the statute is not working as intended. You responded directly to a number of the concerns elicited by the delegate and council at the table today with respect to fair market value, inventory, the third-party agreement. At best, there appears to have been some misunderstanding or miscommunications regarding a number of these items and whether a TPAA exists. The answer is no. Would you be willing to share an agreement with those in the room today? You said yes. I think that goes a long way. So I think with some additional time, some of these issues can be ironed out. We don't need to litigate these issues when we could negotiate them. And I know, Delegate, that this has been an issue sort of near and dear to your heart in recent years, and I understand how frustrating it is not to see movement, particularly since this is state law. I balance that by looking at these tariff changes, and there are no operational changes, as Mr. Hoppick noted. These are more in the vein of clarification, so I don't necessarily see any problems with these. I do see problems that need to be addressed on these other issues. I do note that some of the other parties and parties at the table mentioned some billing concerns and some phantom charges. Those issues, I personally do not believe are appropriate for the commissioners to address. These are ones that Consumer Affairs Division, to the extent there's misbillings or errors, those could be handled through other processes that this commission has in place. So I'll have a few other questions for the parties, but it's clear that the parties haven't had sufficient time to. 1 hour is not enough. And after hearing the questions, I may be inclined to request that the parties meet in earnest. And Mr. Michael, you threw out there a 45-day period to perhaps get one of these TPAA boilerplates in order. And it sounds like Ms. Sikora might have a go-by that she can share with you. And I think we could possibly come back in a status conference in a reasonable amount of time to get a report. Because this is not a trial type evidentiary hearing. We're not entertaining evidence. I don't want to see emails. I definitely don't want to hear private communications with staff. And for those who are unaware, the commissioners have no contact or communication with staff on matters like this contested proceeding. They are effectively an independent agency within an independent agency, and we treat them as such. So a lot of my technical questions, I think, were answered to my satisfaction by Mr. Mike Heel, but I know my colleagues have spent a lot of time, as well as particularly advisor Joey Chen has spent several years on this topic. Thank you, Joey, going through these issues. So I'll turn to my colleagues, and then we'll see where we go from there. So, Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me start by apologizing to Delegate Carr, because I jumped ahead to January and called him former Delegate Carr, and I apologize, Al.
Soon to be.
For that. And I did vote for that law in 2007. You got quite a few votes out of me over the years, and I think I might have gotten one or two out of you at least. But it's important, and it's state policy. And I've been on this. Mr. Chairman, you're right. We've been on this for these street lighting issues and energy efficiencies and savings for a long time. And I, for one, have been saying this is low-hanging fruit in terms of energy efficiency. It's low-hanging fruit. You look at that picture you showed us from space that shows the stark difference between BG&E service territory and Pepco's service territory. It's stark. And I've always said the municipalities are key to this. They're key. And the highest, I think, I don't know the numbers, but I think anecdotally, the highest concentration of municipal governments, most of them smaller ones, in the state of Maryland are in Prince George's and Montgomery County. That's Pepco's service territory. And yet, Mr. Mike Heel says we don't have any municipalities that own their own lights, even though we have a state law that Delegate Carr wrote and I voted for on the books for 15 years. And I don't sense that we got the same problem at BG&E, and I fail to understand what's going on. And I want to ask Mr. Mike Heel a few questions about this, because I'm not pleased either. Maybe for different reasons than the chairman, but I'm not pleased. So let me ask you, why did I hear that this is working in Pepco's DC service territory in terms of making this work, but not in Maryland's part of your service territory?
I don't think that's correct, Your Honor. We don't own the streetlights in DC. The district owns the streetlights in DC.
Right, and that's what we're talking about here. The municipalities would own the streetlights.
And in my tenure at the company, we've had one request from a municipality to purchase streetlights.
Well, maybe because they find the hurdles too high, Mr. Mike Hill. Could that be the case?
It could be.
Well, what are you going to do about that?
We're going to work and get better.
Let me ask you this. On page 16 of your revised tariff, it specifically references third-party attachment agreements. The
Yes.
words written tariff. Explain to this commissioner, please, how we have no say over that tariff language. Because that's what you seem to say. We have no play.
That's absolutely not what we're saying. First of all, the pole attachment agreement, once the streetlights are sold, they're not Pepco property anymore. Right?
I get that. You own the pole. It's just part of your plant, which is why it's in your tariff.
Right. And we're just letting people know that they have to have a pole attachment agreement. So the objection on confidentiality went to the communications pole attachment agreement. When we draft this model pole attachment agreement, I'm happy for the commission to look at it and to receive it.
Well, I don't know. I saw some DRs from our staff where companies said, we're not sharing any information with you, staff. These are confidential.
Well,
that's
first
why I
of all-
asked the question of BG&E, were they confidential? Because I don't see why this is a matter of state secret.
First of all, we shared the agreements with staff. And we would share the agreements, the the telecom pole attachment agreements if we had a confidentiality agreement with the municipalities.
Why are they confidential at all? So explain to me what proprietary nature of these agreements.
Well, there are fees in there.
Okay, so strike out the fees and everything else is policy, right? Black out the fees.
Yep.
I can handle that. We
would have had to contact Verizon and get their approval, and they could have come in here. The nature of the pole attachment agreements is not a secret.
Sure sounds like it to me. I can quote from the book sheet if you want me to, but I'm not going to do that. Just sounds like the company is not making best efforts to get some stuff done that the law and the General Assembly of this state and this man and myself were students of and part of. And it seems like you're dragging your feet to me as a company. And I fail to understand why. And I'm not pleased. I'll let it go at that, Mr. Chairman, but I'm not happy about this.
Thank you. Commissioner Bubar.
Thank you. And thank you, Commissioner O'Donnell, and I would agree. I don't have the history since I'm new to the commission, but when I gained that history and went back and spent a lot of time with Joey and he gave me the background and understand that the law has been in the books this long. And then when I read the BGE filing that we just talked about, I found it incredible that we were dealing with these issues and that they couldn't have been solved. And I do agree that it seems as if there's some feet dragging over things that should not be that challenging. So, Chairman, I appreciate your offer or your suggestion that maybe we allow more time for some of these issues to be worked out, because I think that they can be worked out. I just do have a couple questions on, and to reiterate what Commissioner O'Donnell said, PEPCO did say that the TPAAs are confidential, and I think referenced a previous Supreme Court decision, and I don't know that that's totally relevant, so I think we need clarity on whether these TPAs are confidential. If there's a legal reason, I don't know that we saw that full legal analysis because it was based on a communication decision. So I think we need clarity on are they confidential or not from a legal perspective. Hopefully the answer to that is no, but it sounds as if there's willingness to be able to share going forward in any case. So, but I note that we need clarity on that. I do have a question on the energy saving dimming part night lighting. Are there issues with those being installed, or is PEPCO saying that, to reiterate what BGE said, that there are issues with how they are charged if it's less than $4,000?
So I'll let Mr. Schaefer answer that. That's more of a technical question. Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Lapari, I've got my wrong expert.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, commissioners and attendees. My name is Paul Lapari. I'm manager of smart lighting at PHI today. Madam Commissioner, in regards to your question, very similar to BGE, we don't have a way of measuring, a kilowatt hour for a dimming function that occurs. On top of that, we don't have that smart lighting, program at PHI like BGE does. Something that we are pushing forward to do. And even with, as, identified it, as far as smart nodes, that's exactly one of the components that would be added onto the streetlight, controlling the streetlight as well as communicating what's going on in regards to ability to dim. But that also has to be communicated back to a central communication system. So it's a two-part item. It's not just the cost to implement a node, which is the relatively cheaper part. The other part is the cost to install a centrally managed system, very similar to an outage management system that has that supervisory control of those smart nodes in the field. So it's a two-part component.
Okay. And maybe this question is for staff. I was just wondering, I didn't see that anybody offered an opinion on the Tenco lighting definition of fair market value. So I don't know if staff had anything they wanted to add on that.
I can answer that question, Commissioner. Once again, James Greger on behalf of staff. So our issue with the fair market value definition is that the fair market value term is included in Local Government Article 1-1309, which is the statute that's controlling in this case. And the legislator offered no special definition of fair market value when it passed that into the local government article. So the only definition that we have to go on as far as fair market value is the common law definition, which we included in our buck sheet. So any more prescriptive definition of fair market value kind of risks going into the area of formula rates as opposed to a negotiated price between two willing participants. So that's where staff's concern was as far as drilling down into fair market value as far as the definition of it.
Okay, thank you.
Can
Those
I
are my
respond to that also, Commissioner? The Tanco. So Tanco has cited, I believe, the Maine and the Rhode Island statute. And the Maine and Rhode Island statute are different. And the Maine and Rhode Island statute, I believe, require utilities to sell their streetlights at the net book value. And there's a difference, as staff counsel noted, between net book value and fair market value. And, you know, the Maryland legislature has required fair market value. So that's the distinction, I believe, that makes the difference.
Thank you.
Before I turn to Commissioner Richard, I do just have one follow-up on the fair market value. And I found the response by PEPCO to be somewhat compelling in DR 220. You're going to use a combination of fair market value and average net book value. How much of a market is there for used street lighting? Because the purchaser will be the municipality. I don't know even what they do with do they actually get the used streetlights? Do they want the used streetlights?
Once they purchase the streetlights, they're the municipality's property.
Could I ask the two representatives at the table? Does Chevy Chase Village or Section 3, would you want these old lights?
There are a couple of issues here. Number one, the tariff specifically says that the company will install, remove, or convert each streetlight on payment of a one-time CIAC, quote, equal to the average cost per streetlight during the most recent 3-year period available. So even if the light was 20 years old that's on the pole, they're saying you have to pay for something that you don't have, first of all. Secondly, the statute says municipalities need to notify the company that they wish to purchase, they wish to purchase street lights. It doesn't say they wish to purchase the company's street lights. We want to purchase new LED lights. No one wants used HPS lights that are 20 years old. No one, not even the company.
I suspect you would not, but Mr. Michael, is it your understanding that the municipalities would be effectively buying the existing streetlights?
That's right, and the tariff provision that she's discussing is the tariff provision that we have currently if customers want to purchase and want us to install LED street lighting. It's separate and apart from the sale of street lights, and it should not be confused.
Okay, I'll need to further drill into that distinction. Ms. Ferguson, you don't want the used streetlights either.
They're useless and not energy efficient, and there's no value to them. So no, they do not want that. They want the new lights.
Okay, well, we just uncovered a major problem here because the dump truck of lights is going to be dropped off in your parking lot somewhere, and that's what
we learned that recently too.
Okay.
And I would like to make sure that it's clear that it's not so much whether we get the old lights, because we have no use for them and there's no market for them, as you know. Nobody wants them anymore. They're useless. It's who gets to say what the components of fair market value are.
It's a complex
It is.
issue here. Okay. Mr. Michael, anything to add further? Okay.
No, Your Honor.
Commissioner Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And, already this discussion, I think a lot of my questions are probably moot at this point. But I just want to not to necessarily pile on, but just also express, I think, my frustration that we had this law for since 2007. We have municipalities that have clearly wanted to move forward with this. We even discussed this at the recent rate case for 9655. And at that time, I think there was direction provided to the company to discuss this with the municipalities, and apparently that didn't happen. I don't know why our direction wasn't heeded. But then, I'm hearing that there was an opportunity for the company to meet with the municipalities, and somehow it was cut off in an hour. I do feel good that maybe today we've made some progress. A number of concessions have been made by the company, if I've heard you correctly, that you will go back and talk about the third-party agreement. You will actually provide an opportunity to discuss with the municipalities what this fair market value calculation will be. So is that correct? Have we established that out of today's proceeding?
That is correct, Commissioner, and I just feel compelled to kind of give you a timeline of this meeting because it was only an hour. But can I just give you some dates? On June 30th, staff asked Pepco if it was willing to meet with the municipalities to discuss this. On July 5th, we responded that we were willing to have a call.
Why? Can I just? We don't have a lot of time here today, and I don't think this is necessary. The fact is, the law has been on the books since 2007. Why hasn't the company initiated? Maybe I should ask it this way: when the law was passed, what steps did the company take to allow this law to go into effect, to initiate, to enable the municipalities to take advantage of this new authority that the legislature had availed to them?
We would follow the law. If we got a letter requesting the purchase of our streetlights, we would start negotiating with the municipality.
Okay, so it's very passive. You're just waiting then for something to happen. As we look at this problem, and then clearly it's a problem if we have municipalities in a regulated area, under a utility that we regulate, that are seem to be having their efforts frustrated by the utility. Do we need to have a rulemaking? Is this a regulatory approach we need to take to see if we can clarify what the responsibilities of the utility are under this law?
That could be one process the commission could take, Your Honor.
Okay.
Certainly. I'm not going to tell the commission when it should or should not do a
so
rulemaking.
the company really doesn't see a way to really negotiate this without some kind of an active role from the commission. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's not what I'm saying. We're happy to meet with the utilities and work through all of these, or with the municipalities and work through all of these issues.
Okay.
And I've committed today that we're going to do that. We're going to provide a model pole attachment agreement.
Okay. Well, that's gratifying to hear that today. It's just really a shame that it's taken till this moment. We've been waiting since 2007 to have this sort of a breakthrough. So, I'm going to just stop with a lot of my questions, Mr. Chairman. But I'm interested to hear the proposal. I don't know if waiting to hear what your proposal might be, if I'm prepared to vote on this tariff today, because it seems incomplete. It appears that we have some very basic elements that need to be in this tariff, such as the fair market value definition, some kind of a clarification on exactly what this third-party pole attachment agreement needs to look like, and there are some other issues, and they've been itemized today that may or may not need to be in this tariff. So. To the extent that there's an opportunity for the parties to get together and come back in I think 45 days I heard, and come back with either a more complete tariff, but I'm interested to hear also what your proposal is on a status agreement that could work also. But anyway, I'll be interested to hear a little more about what your thoughts are on that.
Good, thank you. Well, we'll hear from Commissioner Linton and get his thoughts. I would just like to note, Mr. McKeel, I believe you're right in your interpretation of the statute with respect to who gets all the old lights. And under local government statute 1-1309, the municipalities will be receiving a dump truck full of used existing street lighting equipment that is located in the county or municipality. So you will be responsible for the accepting and disposal, according to state law, of the used streetlights. So I see Mr. Michael vigorously shaking his head, but that's the clear wording of this statute. Commissioner Linton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'll say that I've been in the industry for a bit now, so it's not every day that I see something that surprises me, although it's somewhat refreshing when I do. Unfortunately, this is not one of those times. I'm very surprised that a matter that I saw well over a decade ago is still unresolved. That's unfortunate, and it does give me concern regarding signing off on the tariff language that would appear to confirm or at least solidify a bit more processes that are clearly not working. And so I'd start with a question for the company regarding its response to the Commission staff's data requests, specifically data requests 3, 4, 8, and 9. And you probably recognize all of them. They're all referencing the Commission's authority to review the third-party agreements. Help me to understand how the Commission's authority is limited in light of the statute that gives the Commission authority to resolve disputes regarding the local government's purchasing of street lighting equipment.
So the statute in my reading, and I could be wrong, is the dispute that the commission would resolve would be the issue of the fair market value.
That's wrong. So section, let's see, we'll go to section F3, where the language is, and begging my colleagues' indulgence, I'll read the section here. It says, any dispute, I could probably stop there, but
Yep.
any dispute between an electric company and a county or municipality arising under this subsection shall be submitted to the Public Service Commission for resolution. So the company's response in those 4 data responses that were provided to us, I'll note that there's some gaps in responses, so I don't know if they might have been used more times than that. But for those particular responses, the company has specifically called out this Court of Appeals order, which again is in 1987, so it is before and the statute, which of course, as both of us as attorneys know, that means that the statute would be the current law as opposed to the Court of Appeals opinion where there's a conflict. So, did I miss something here? Is there?
No, sir.
Okay. So then this response then, and just the general question about whether or not the commission, and by extension, our technical staff at a minimum, should be able to review these materials. This response isn't really accurate.
Let me be clear that the technical staff did get those materials, Your Honor. We provided a copy of the full attachment agreement to the staff.
But this is after the company, after the staff requested them and after the company's objection.
I don't remember the timing but ultimately we provided them a copy of the full attachment agreement.
So I think that's kind of an example of the challenge that I'm hearing from some of the county representatives here, that there's for lack of a better word, roadblocks to allow the process to move forward smoothly. Because here you have a situation where the commission has jurisdiction under statute, and our technical staff is attempting to obtain the information, and it's only after issuing the data request, and after the company objects, that the company finally provides the material. So those are challenges that are making it difficult for our staff to do their work. Now, I understand they've recommended supporting the tariff language today, but they're focusing primarily on the 4 corners of the language. which again, as I've already noted, Mr. Chairman, I think that there's the language itself is reaffirming practices that are causing challenges in implementing the statute. And I think that's where we have, at least I for one, as one commissioner, would have a concern. My questions regarding the fair market value were already addressed by my colleagues. I think I'll stop there at this point, Mr. Chairman, but I think that I am also curious to hear how we would move forward with this particular tariff provision and making certain that the statute is lived up to in whatever capacity it needs to be. To the extent any of these county municipalities or incorporated entities are interested in owning their street lighting, that they also have the obligation to follow the statute, which means that you need to provide a written request to do so. My understanding is that there's only been one thus far. Is that?
That I'm aware of, Your Honor.
Okay. So that's not a lot to complain about if there hasn't been a lot of requests in writing. Now, I understand that you've been seeking it for a long time. I was in the meeting, so I understand that you've been seeking it for a long time. But the statute gives us direction as to how this administratively should move forward. And so to activate the rights that you have, that's the steps that need to be taken. And my understanding, at least, is that that's only happened once. So I'll stop there, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. Before I turn to Commissioner O'Donnell, the one request was made. What municipality was that?
I believe it was Chevy Chase View, Your Honor.
And they're not participating in this case, is that right? I don't believe they are. Well, I think we have 4 municipalities with Chevy Chase in its name. And what is the status of their request?
They did not go forward with it.
Okay. And just to be clear on the record, neither Section 3 nor Chevy Chase Village has made a request of PEPCO to...
What we have asked is to get demonstration lights so that we could be sure that what we wanted to buy was what we wanted. You know, there's a step before saying we want to wholesale buy all our lights. We're trying to get the best quality light for our community, and without first doing a demonstration light, we really can't make that final determination to make a request of PEPCO. And in fact, in 2009, it was a demonstration light, an induction demonstration light, and the charges that they wanted subsequent to that sort of stopped us from doing anything further, and PEPCO was unwilling to discuss it any further at that time. So there is a lot of preliminary discussion. It's not like you go to Home Depot and say, oh, you know, that would be good for our community. You know, we really have to see it in situ, make sure it works, make sure it's the right level of light for our community. So there are steps before you get to that.
How many streetlights are in Section 3?
51.
Only 51. Oh, boy.
Yes, and we have been saving for some time so that we could buy all our streetlights.
And you plan to only install 51, and it's a one-for-one swap?
No, it is not. We had a lighting designer come in, do measurements, and we will hope if we get all of the lights that we want, it would be 66.
So you would add
Yes.
15 more. Okay. Thank you. And Ms. Ferguson, do you want to respond?
Yes, please. Chevy Chase Village is trying to make the budgetary decision about this. It is so difficult to get even to first base because you have to do the inventory first that you're required to pay for, which is not clear as to what that requires. That they have the money, but the decision is it the best decision for the government? Staff can't give the government that answer without being able to negotiate with PEPCO, and there was no way to do that properly up to this point. So
All right.
that's what they're looking for, is some kind of process that works.
Chicken and egg.
Yes.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a follow-up, Mr. Mike Keel, to your colloquy with Commissioner Linton, so the DRs came company objected, but ultimately the staff got those third-party attachment agreements. Is
Yes,
that what I heard?
correct.
Okay. And the timing may be unclear on how that,
I don't recall the timing, Your Honor.
it's
I'm
immaterial
sorry.
to my question. The third-party attachment agreements that you ultimately provided to the staff, were they confidential versions or were they redacted versions?
Confidential versions?
So they were redacted.
No.
They were I
No,
asked the
I'm
question
sorry.
wrong. It wasn't a trick
I'm
question.
sorry.
I asked it wrong.
They were not redacted.
Okay, so they were,
If that's the question, they were not redacted. They were the entire agreement.
so they were still confidential per your position, but there was no information obscured
Yes.
to the staff.
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. This has been an issue that's been before this commission for some time. As I noted at the outset, that there are issues fully within the corners of the tariff language, although we spent almost the majority, if not all the time, discussing some related issues regarding fair market value, the TPAA, the inventories, and some other definitions. I rarely call a vote without knowing exactly where all the commissioners stand on an issue, but I'm going to do so today, and we'll see where the vote shakes out based on staff's recommendation. Because I do believe that we could vote to approve the PEPCO tariff revisions filed on April 8th today. That said, there's a lot of additional issues that need to be ironed out, and the 1-hour meeting that occurred last week was just plainly insufficient. I suspect, regardless of this vote, I'm going to be requesting the indulgence of my colleagues to bring everybody back here in 6 weeks to discuss the resolution of these issues, and I suspect that they will result in additional tariff filings and changes and a submission by PEPCO at some date in the future, so that Section 3 can get its 66 lights installed in a reasonable time frame, not that far in the future. And I think that's incumbent. That's the responsibility of the utility to move forward and execute this law. That 6-week period would bring us to October 5th. We have an administrative meeting on that day, and Mr. Michael, hopefully that's a little more than 45 days, a little less, 42 days. Does that time frame work for you if we call everybody back for a status conference?
I think so. We're willing to, comply.
Okay. Well, let me call the vote first on the staff recommendation. We'll see how that shakes out, and then we'll look at the calendar. So I would move that we accept the tariff revisions for filing as revised by staff in its comments dated August 17th, 2022, and direct the company to file clean copies of the revised tariff pages with an effective date of August 24th, 2022. The vote begins with Commissioner Bubar.
I too like to know if I'm in the minority or majority before I vote, so I don't know. But as much as I like making decisions when we can in efficiency, I vote that we do not approve the staff recommendations and allow these issues to be worked out so that we have a clean version that addresses all of the issues that have been discussed today. So, nay.
We do let the most junior member of the commission set the tone. Commissioner Linton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would also vote no.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
I'm going to condition my vote, and then I'm going to explain my vote. So the condition to my vote will be that a good faith effort is made by PEPCO to bring back a tariff to us that implements the law as passed by the legislature and is the statutory law of the state. So that's my condition. My explanation of my vote, which is aye, is this. If I don't sense that the company is going to be operating in good faith in this space, I can't prove that they haven't, but I want to see some low-hanging fruit picked here. And if I get a sense that that's not happening, and the company can avail themselves of their sister companies in Exelon, of other states' experiences, of what they do in DC, where it's working elsewhere, work with advocates. Delegate Carr has a wealth of knowledge around this area. You can avail yourselves of all those things and get with the stakeholders in the municipalities and make this tariff work. If that doesn't happen, I suspect I'll have plenty of opportunity elsewhere to express my concerns about that not happening.
Commissioner Richard.
I vote no, but I do join in Commissioner O'Donnell's condition. I do hope that in October 5th, I think you said the date was, that we do get the parties back here and that there is evidence of a good faith effort by the utility to enable these municipalities to avail themselves of the right that the legislature has given them. So with that, I do vote no, but I do support your August, I can't get the right date right, October conference.
Thank you. With that vote, my motion fails. The tariff revisions are not accepted for filing. We will move forward. I note that we have the Delmarva Power rate case coming up, which puts us right up against October 5th. So I'm going to propose that we actually give the parties an additional week. 7 weeks. So that would be October 12th, 2022. We'll schedule this as a status conference on the administrative meeting. Parties are free to file any updates, but we're really expecting that the parties sit around a conference table, not a virtual Zoom. I'm sure one of the municipalities could offer up a conference room. I would expect one of them to do so, or perhaps Pepco. Staff is not obligated to file any buck sheet or paper unless staff feels the need to do so. And the commissioners in this capacity, these aren't typical for administrative meetings, but hopefully to the extent there are outstanding issues, we could mediate and possibly, if necessary, arbitrate these remaining concerns. But I don't see them as insurmountable. Again, I don't think, based on what I've heard from many of the parties today, it hasn't been in your hearts to negotiate. It's been in your hearts to litigate. And this is an opportunity over the next 7 weeks to see eye to eye with each other, because I think we've cleared up a lot of the misconceptions today.
Can I just ask one other question? Maybe the parties at that time, maybe they could advise the commission if there are difficulties still that are being encountered, whether or not a rulemaking of some kind is advisable to try to overcome some of the issues that obviously have been encountered in trying to enact or to get this law into effect.
Thank you, Commissioner. And on that point, I would hope a rulemaking is not necessary. They take time. It'll take us a year to get proposed regulations. I think the parties are close, and I think we could get there. Commissioner Linton.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's just one other suggestion when the parties decide to meet. And this is building off of the image that Chairman shared with us earlier during this meeting of the entire area or region of Pepco service territory where lighting challenges might occur because of just the differences between LED versus other forms of bulbs. There may be other local governments that are interested in also pursuing their own purchase of lighting and just did not have the wherewithal or even the knowledge to participate in this proceeding today. So it might be worth extending the offer as part of those meetings to encourage them to at least send a representative or to coordinate amongst themselves. And perhaps there's other issues that'll be resolved as well. So this doesn't linger it gets resolved for Chevy Chase, but not resolved for someone else.
That's an important point. And let me also say, I don't think the commission needs to prescribe that you have 3 meetings or 4 meetings, but it needs to be more than one 1-hour meeting the day before our October administrative meeting. So, Mr. McKeel, I'll let you handle the leadership of that. Please let the other municipalities that did not participate today, they didn't let us know that they weren't coming. I suspect it's not for a lack of interest, but I do not know why they're not here. And we'll see everybody in October. With that, today's meeting is adjourned.